we are cultivating a fundamental trust in life, that all of life has its own wisdom, intelligence, and that in the right conditions we can listen and understand the deeper meaning and message within any unfolding of life, and especially, of course, within ourselves. And that condition is an unconditional compassion, a full welcoming. So the shift is from any kind of resistance of life or reality, any kind of denial, to a full, open, loving, welcoming of life as it is. This also means a fundamental acceptance of life as it is. So when we move through life, we move with a certain kind of patience, availability for all that is, and especially, of course, all that is within us. And this final shift is a certain kind of, I want to call it a disentanglement. It's a shift from the sense of projecting the source of our experience on the outside to the ownership of the source of our experience within us. So it's a shift in, we could say, responsibility. Is life responsible for how I am and how I feel? Or am I responsible for how I am and how I feel? Another way of putting it is a shift in ownership. Is what's happening in me fully mine, and I am owning it within my domain? Or am I in some way projecting it outside of me? To put it in really simple words, it's a shift from any kind of blaming and complaining to the sovereignty of holding within your domain all of what's happening inside of you. Because it's happening inside of you, because it's arising within. That makes it yours. So it's called self-responsibility. And self-responsibility for me is the fundamental empowerment within this work of living compassion. It is once again stepping beyond a kind of protective layer and stepping into a full embracing of all my energy, all of what matters to me, all of how what matters to me moves me. And so, in a way, I experience it as a kind of reclaiming of my power. How is it a reclaiming of my power? When I understand the protective mechanism of blame, then I think it becomes clear. Blame is an outsourcing of my happiness onto someone else. Blame says, you are responsible for how I feel. It's your fault that I'm angry. It's your fault that I'm upset or sad. And therefore, I don't have to do anything. I will just sit here and be as I am. I save all my energy. I don't have to use it at all. You change. You be different. You do things differently. And then I will be happy. So I'm protecting myself from needing to take any responsibility for the situation. I'm protecting myself for needing to use any energy to shift things in any way. And I can just wait for someone else to do something else so that I'm happy again. So it's beautiful. I love it. I love that I can just sit here and be and not change. That's great. And at the same time, I'm putting myself in a position of victimhood. I am the victim of whoever has taken my happiness away, and I'm dependent on them cooperating with whatever I need to make me happy again. So I've given up all my responsibility, and in victimhood, I've given away all my power. You have all the power. It totally depends on you whether I will be happy or not. So on one hand, I'm very relaxed because I don't have to expend my energy in any way. But on the other hand, I'm completely dependent. I'm helpless. So while blame as a protective layer denies our responsibility and conserves our energy, it also cultivates a helplessness. And it gives away all the power in the situation. As long as then, and this I experience it as an entanglement. It's like I'm caught by a story about what other people need to do, someone else needs to do, how life should be, what God needs to do. My life energy is caught in that story, into that projection. I've turned my attention, in some ways, I guess you could say, away from feeling my pain as my aliveness, because that hurts and that's hard. And so I project my pain onto the outer world so that in some ways I get a distance, in some ways I get a hope, but I don't have any power. So when I disentangle, it's like I'm reeling in the threads of projection, the threads of blame. I'm pulling them in. And as I do that, I step into my responsibility for who I am, for how I am, for what I feel, for what matters to me. And as I hold it within my responsibility, I'm empowered to make choices, to stay present, also to grieve when my choice is not to maybe take action. When I step into my power of holding responsibility for my experience, I also set you free. And I have to take responsibility for all of what's happening in me to really allow you to be free. So, another way of talking about this shift is the shift from codependency to interdependence, with very often a stepping stone in between called independence. In codependency, we are emotionally bonded, and my happiness depends on you, and your happiness depends on me. So I need to modulate my behavior according to what you will like, and I want you to modulate your behavior according to what I like. And we're not attuning to our own authentic aliveness. We're attuning to each other's stories about the other one. This is what I think you will like, so therefore I will do it like this and like this. I've projected ideas onto you. Some of them might be true, some of them might not. And now I'm attuning rather to this idea about what's happening between us rather than to myself, to what's really happening in me. And I'm wanting you to do the same, and when you don't, I blame you for my pain. And so we're entangled, we're bonded, emotionally, and we say call it bondage, emotional bondage. Our emotional slavery is the term Marshall Rosenberg would use. He was quite intense with his language sometimes. Or slaves to each other in codependency. Codependency is always co. There's not really such thing as just a straight up dependency. One person's dependent, another is not. That doesn't really happen. But there is a whole dynamic within codependency called one up and one down. So there is the one down codependent and the one up codependent. And the one up codependent has the apparent power in that space. And the one down codependent is the one sort of chasing after them, hoping for them to give some attention or love or whatever they're hoping for. But the one up codependent, who is sort of looks more free or independent, is still in some way enchained by that relationship, and somehow you could say getting some sense of power from that person who's dependent on them. There are, of course, natural dependencies, like in parenting. It's still a codependency. The parent is also dependent on the child in a certain way. The parent is obviously the one up and the child is the one down. And that's a natural and can be very healthy dynamic when there is these reasons for dependency. Maybe with elder care, there's also a kind of codependency. And that's within the realm of what we could say, I'm expanding my responsibility to include my child. I'm expanding my responsibility to include my elder parent, for example. So there's not an idea here that codependency is bad or a problem or wrong. There's natural codependency. And at the same time, codependency between equals will instill inequality, which then alienates a dimension of the relationship. And codependency between equals will be fostering some level of victimhood mentality, and will be a loss of sovereignty. Sovereignty.
So you're saying that it tends to go out of balance by definition?
Yeah. And so then there's a whole ideas about how to step out of codependencies, that the one down codependent needs to rock the boat, because the one up codependent has no reason to. That person's the one who's sort of, you could say, like benefiting from it. So don't expect the one up codependent to want things to be different. They're somehow, in a way, feeding on the neediness of that one down codependent. So the one down codependent needs to rock the boat, and the one down codependent, if you want the relationship to continue, needs to rock the boat gently. So, because too hard can be upsetting. If you are in a codependency and you start practicing self-responsibility, that will show up as boat rocking. So this is implied in what we're inviting here, that you will be subtly or not so subtly stepping out of this codependent realm. The intermediary phase, called independence, is also not free. So obviously codependence is not free. You're not free to attune to yourself because you're dependent on tuning to someone else. In independence, it's a reaction against dependence, and so we can sometimes call it anti-dependence. It says, no, I don't want to care for you anymore. I don't want to care about how you feel and what you think and what you need. I do my thing. And I reject the bondage. I reject the entanglement. Because it's a rejection, it's not more free. It's just the opposite reaction to dependency. And so Marshall Rosenberg called it the obnoxious phase. because he wanted to be clear, first of all, that it can be obnoxious, and for you, when you are being obnoxious, to have a lot of compassion for yourself. Yeah, of course I am. I'm cutting a dynamic which isn't serving me. Dependency corresponds to the child phase. Independence corresponds, or anti-dependence corresponds to a teenage phase. And interdependence corresponds to an adult phase. And interdependence, which Marshall called emotional liberation, because we were enslaved and now we're liberated, is that sense of wholeness. I am here, I am complete, and within my wholeness and within my domain, everything that unfolds within me, every need, every feeling, everything that matters, every sensation, every illness, it's my responsibility. I am sovereign to this domain. I have ownership of everything that happens. It's all mine. These are my thoughts. These are my experiences, and no one else is experiencing what I'm experiencing, because no one else is me. And that makes it all mine. And you are you. And you are whole, and you are complete, and you are free. And in your freedom, I want you to attune to yourself and honor what's alive in you. I want you to be yourself and show me who you really are, your authenticity. And I acknowledge that we are connected and interconnected, and I consider that as part of my attunement to myself. I'm not just attuning to me, I'm attuning to our interdependence. I'm attuning to this us that exists. Because within me is an aliveness that I describe as caring, as love, as consideration. That's natural to me and that's innate to me. So I wouldn't be true to myself if I didn't consider you. That is interdependence. There's not any sense of obligation. It's not that I have to care for you, but we are all in our depth naturally giving. It's a joy to feed ducks. It's a natural upliftment in everyone's heart to know that someone else is happy because of your presence, because of your actions, because of your choices. We all want that. And so interdependence is a space of authenticity, sovereignty, and natural giving, natural caring. Self-responsibility does not mean self-blame. So the phenomenon of blame is the opposite of self-responsibility. When you do self-blame, you're stepping into the same protective layer of saying, my past self is responsible. So you're simply splitting yourself between the present self and your past self. Instead of blaming someone else, I blame me some time ago, even 5 minutes ago. I was a bit late this morning. If I was feeling guilty about that, I would be blaming the self who was taking time in the morning for what I'm experiencing now, which is all the judgments of you. How could you come late? So I'm just exporting my power to my past self. The mechanism is the same. I'm a victim of me just before. half an hour ago. So the sense of victimhood remains. It's just somehow in this strange split between me now and me then. Sovereignty says, what I'm experiencing now is present to me, is mine. It includes a certain compassion for the past self, and I was doing my best. Self-responsibility doesn't mean doing it alone. I can absolutely reach out, connect, have support in moving through the experience. As I've said before, we start by judging, we start by blaming, and then we keep going. So there's no implication here that we would suddenly live a blame-free life, just that we wouldn't stop at blaming. Blaming is a starting point, and then we keep going into our sovereignty. And we can have support doing that. We can reach out to our empathy friends, to our living compassion community, and say, wow, I'm in blaming up a storm right now. You know, can you sit with me? I'm curious how it will be to reel in the threads or the tentacles of blame. And the last thing I want to say is that my experience, to reach a kind of 95% self-responsibility is relatively available. It's like, yes, of course, these are my feelings. Yes, of course, these are my needs. Yes, I know, that's what matters to me. Absolutely. But if you would just not have, but couldn't you have just, like, not right then? But come on, like, you know, you knew that that mattered to me. Come on. And that last 5% is as difficult as the first 95%. That little niggling kind of bargaining with life, you know, if only, shouldn't have, couldn't it have been, wouldn't you, didn't you, couldn't you? And so that last pulling in of my projection, that last denial of reality, that last bargaining with your choices takes kind of another level of expanded awareness. And it also makes an incredible difference. Any amount of self-responsibility makes a difference. And then when I reach 100%, it's like the difference between 100% and 99, it's still a radical feeling of me being truly and honestly contained within myself. It's really for me the kind of a very direct experience of wholeness, where I can feel whatever that experience of pain, discomfort, and it's not leaking out, it's like a container which is sealed, it's held, and there's something peaceful in that, but as I said, really empowering. I'm standing kind of on my own 2 feet. I'm not leaning on anything. I'm not relying on anything. I'm just there. Feeling it, holding it, owning it, and setting you fully free. I am fully free. So this is what I wanted to share about self-responsibility as this final paradigm shift that we make in living compassion. And I'm open to hear a few things, and we'll have the break a bit earlier. Yeah.